This program is made possible by PSCA, the Plan Sponsor Council of America. For over 60 years, PSCA has served retirement plan sponsors through education, advocacy, and research. Information at psca.org or at 312-419-1863.
Welcome to this episode of Money Sense. I'm your host, Anthony Contrucci. This week, we'll be covering homes and mortgages, and we'll be talking with experts from the mortgage and real estate industries.
Hi, I'm Bathsheba Wyatt Draper. I'm a homeownership consultant and the representative for the Freddie Mac Borrowers Help Center, covering Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Ohio, and Iowa. I'm a financial capability coach and have an extensive background working with pre-purchase, post-purchase, foreclosure prevention, credit counseling, homeowner transitioning, and teaching financial literacy. And I currently work for Neighborhood Housing Services in Chicago. Right now, in 2014, as the market is changing, it's a good time for some to look for a new home. There are many options for first-time homeowners and those who enter in the housing market. Take the time to attend a first-time home buying class if you can, as this will prepare you to better communicate with the people who are going to be a part of your home buying process. The information you will get from today's episode of Money Sense can help you put together a plan of action. Have pen and paper handy so that you can take down numbers and questions that you might have. The goal is not to get you in a home, but to keep you in a home. Remember, buying a home is a business transaction. Treat it like one. Learn all that you can and be unapologetic about asking questions. This is your money, investment, and commitment for the next 30 years of your life. Your power lies in your knowledge of the process. Now enjoy the show.
Al Thorup is the Executive Director of the Indiana Mortgage Bankers Association, where he manages day-to-day needs such as member communications, meetings, recruiting of new members, and advocacy in Indianapolis and Washington, D.C. Peter Novak Jr. is the Chief Executive Officer of the Greater Northwest Indiana Association of Realtors, or GNIAR, which represents more than 1,800 realtors in offices in Lake, Porter, Jasper, Newton, Stark, and Pulaski counties in Indiana. Al and Peter, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, Anthony.
I'm really looking forward to this episode. Still very timely. A lot of people are talking about, do you buy, do you rent, how is the real estate market? Is it going up? Is it going down? And there's a lot of people with a lot of different opinions.
Sure.
Yeah. In today's market, in your opinions, maybe start with Peter. What are your thoughts on buying or selling a home today?
Well, there are a lot of great reasons to buy or sell a home today. As we all know, and we don't have to go back to it too much, but in 2007, obviously the housing market collapsed quite a bit. But since then, the last couple of years, the housing market has come back pretty strong. And some of the reasons to buy is that we have historic low interest rates still. Affordability is still at an all-time high. You can get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of the house. And in Indiana, we have property tax cap, so that's all the more of the reason why somebody would want to purchase a home. But I think purchasing a home in the long run has always proven to be a great investment.
Good counsel. Al, any thoughts on that?
Well, just to back up what Pete said, we've seen over the last 3, 4, up to 5 years, sustainable increases in housing values. And so from that standpoint, if you were to have asked people 5, 6 years ago about buying a house, given what was going on in the market, there would be hesitancy because of that value that they had seen gone down. And again, as Pete mentioned as well, interest rates remain low. They remain very affordable for people to look for a new house or have one built or continue to look at refinancing for many people.
Great points. One thing you mentioned is, home values today. And I think one thing maybe we got away from, and I'd love your opinion on this, is that at the end of the day, buying a home, there's a passion component to that. Part of it maybe is an investment component, but typically a longer term investment. I think we kind of got away from that over the past several years, whereby people thought they could make money very quickly, and maybe more of a true buy and hold strategy is best, and not just 3 to 5 years, but probably 5, 7, 10. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, you certainly have people that are investors and they do that for a living. But usually when people buy a home, they're not doing it for the purpose of making money off it. I mean, they're going to live there. That's where they're going to build their life. They hope to make money off it. And I think history has shown in most cases they do, other than when we have blips in the market like we had back 5 years ago or so. But, buying a home always remains probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest investment that most people are going to make in their lifetime. So definitely a great investment.
Yeah, and it is historically the biggest source of intergenerational wealth transfer in our country. And as mentioned, you haven't historically looked at housing as an individual consumer as, I'm buying this as an investment. You're buying it to plant roots. You're buying it to have a source of consistency for your family to grow up and for your children to go to a school system that values education and will help in bringing them up in today's environment.
It's a great point. I think I would maybe end it with, there's definitely the quantitative component to it. You do want to make sure it's a sound investment, but don't forget the qualitative. Don't forget that, again, this is, it's more than just brick and mortar. This is, not just a house, but hopefully a home for people. Yeah. So that being said, compelling arguments. Sure. Sounds like a good time to buy or sell. How does one prepare themselves to, to maybe purchase a home, Al?
Well, what a lot of people need to understand when they go from renting to owning a home, the paradigm shifts. When you're renting or you're living with mom and dad and the ice box breaks down or you've got the furnace go out or you've got lawn that needs to be cut, somebody else does it.
Right.
Somebody else pays for it.
Which is nice.
When you become a homeowner, it's your responsibility. So having started in the mortgage business in 1984, I learned over the decades to counsel people whenever possible, save money. You can get houses today at 100% loan to value or no money down. But the fact of the matter is, not only do lenders like to see cash reserves, but you need to have them as a homeowner in case something happens. The other thing is from a credit standpoint, make sure that you're aware of what's on your credit report. There's opportunities for free credit reports that you can access and take a look and make sure what's there is legitimate. And then make the minimum payments on a house, on all your obligations. Right. That really helps you in terms of the credit score, which is, as Pete knows, critical in a house purchase is having good credit scores.
Right. Interesting. So that's helpful from a kind of preparation standpoint. Maybe Peter, talk a little bit for our viewers with regards to how do you now start the process? So we think we're prepared.
Sure.
And now let's actually let's take that first step.
Well, that's an exciting time in people's lives. The first thing I think somebody should do is certainly go get pre-approved, and I'm pretty sure Al knows a few people that might be able to to help our viewers with that. But go get pre-approved because people have to have a good idea of number one, can they afford the home, and if they can afford a home, what type of home. It helps them narrow the search. And I would say at the same time they're doing that, they could go out and talk to a local realtor. And find out, express to that local realtor what they're looking for, and that realtor can certainly help them narrow that search down for them. So I would say definitely start with the pre-approval process and then speak with the realtor. And in today's world, technology is king. There are a lot of online resources that viewers could go to search about the possibility of buying a home. And so I would certainly take advantage of all those resources that are available to them.
Okay. Is there anything that our viewers, myself included, should avoid when they're preparing to purchase a home?
I would say avoid incurring any additional debt that you don't have to have in the short run. One of the things that lenders will do is they'll take a snapshot at a point in time when you come in to get pre-approved, and part of the approval process looks at how much money do you make, what are your debt obligations at that point in time. And so people sometimes shoot themselves in the foot, if you will, when just before going to buy a house, they see this wonderful car or this truck and they go, oh man, I've got to have this. Well, in a lot of cases, that's okay. You can get both. To be sure, though, drive what you're driving until you've closed on your mortgage. Also, again, don't incur any additional charge debt that you don't need. Prepare yourself financially knowing that someone else is going to take a look at your profile, and they're going to make the decision about your credit worthiness, not you.
And I think one thing I would just add to that, because I think it's great counsel, is that at the end of the day, we all have a limited budget. I don't care who you are, what your earning potential is, et cetera. And so one thing I think is important to note is when you're purchasing items in general, know the items that are appreciating assets, hopefully, or something of actual real intrinsic value versus a depreciating asset, for example. Hey, I like cars, but at the end of the day, if you have to pick between a car or a home, probably better off allocating those resources to the purchasing of a home where, again, there's real long-term value, hopefully there,
Sure,
right? In the years to come.
Right.
So I think that's important when you're kind of stewarding, if you will, that income. Right?
Yeah, well, everyone needs a car. You know, a home is an appreciating value asset, and you know, a car is a depreciating asset. While most cases a necessity, but it's a depreciating asset. So I think anytime you could, you know, put your money into a house versus something like a car, you're gonna benefit in the long run. Right,
absolutely. So this next question kind of goes back to my prior question, which was, you know, how do we start that process?
Sure.
We talked about getting pre-approved. So what does that underwriting process look like? And can you give people any maybe napkin calculations to help them determine going into it maybe what they can afford, so they're not overextending themselves?
Well, there's a number of different mortgage products out there that have different guidelines within them. Then there's some overlays with government regulations now that we didn't have to worry about so much in the past. But generally and historically, what lenders will look at is up to 28 to 33% of their gross monthly income that the lender will accept as income going towards the mortgage payment, and a little more than that going to the rest of the debts plus the mortgage. There is a ceiling right now in the market for conventional lending of 43% total debt to income that for the most part can be utilized or will be utilized by the lender.
Can you define that for our viewers, what that debt to income really means?
Yeah, if you make $1,000 a month, you want to consider, do you want to, and from a lending standpoint, paying more than $280 to $330 for the mortgage and paying no more than $430 of that $1,000 towards all your debt. Now, I will also share this, that one of the big challenges that consumers have is what is their lifestyle. I can tell you as a lender what I think you can afford, but is your lifestyle such that you like to get a new car every year, that you like to travel a lot? If your lifestyle is such, you may want to consider less than what the lender will tell you you're approved for.
So that lifestyle is really maybe the kind of the variable expenses in your life versus the things that the bank would see as fixed expenses.
Exactly.
A car payment, a mortgage, et cetera.
Right, and with what the lending institution says you can afford, take a step back and say, is that on our lifestyle or my lifestyle what I really want to get into? And then work with a realtor, let them know you've got the pre-approval. It gives you that peace of mind. And I know, Pete, you know, from your members, if they've got that pre-approval and the selling agent walks into the listing agent with that, it makes it easier.
Sure. I mean, that in terms of the home buying process, somebody that's pre-approved is just going to be taken a lot more seriously. And I think that's as simple as I could describe it. You know, some home sellers even require that somebody submitting an offer is pre-approved prior to that happening. You know, and oftentimes they're not. But I know that if I'm a home seller and I get multiple offers and one comes in and this person's pre-approved and another person's not, and let's say the offers are similar or equal, I think I'm going to certainly lean towards the one that's pre-approved, because I suspect that, my hope is that the process for the home buying is going to go a lot more smoothly. At least I know this person has at least taken some of the initial steps to be pre-approved, and as long as everything else comes in okay, more than likely he's able to buy the home.
They seem more committed to the process. So that process, I mean, is there typically, and again, typically, a cost associated with that? And how long, you know, if I walk into a bank tomorrow and say, I'm going to get pre-approved for a mortgage, do I have to wait, you know, a week, 2 weeks? So from a cost standpoint and time standpoint?
Usually the costs are minimal, possibly the cost of a credit report to be run. The challenge for some consumers though is gathering the data and making sure they have all their income that they can verify at the point in time where they meet with a lender. They have their asset statements, that they have a good understanding of what's on their credit report. Again, if you look on the internet, I think it's annualcreditreport.com, for free you can get a credit report. Now you'll have to pay a little additional to get a credit score, but the credit report itself is extremely important, so that as a consumer, when I walk in to see a lender, I have my pay stubs, I have my bank statements, and I have my credit report that I pulled, so that when I'm asked all these questions, I've got most all of the answers, and that will speed up the process to where the lender can pull their own credit report, they can verify with the information that's been brought to them, and it's a pretty quick process to get pre-approved.
Well, and you guys bring up a good point. You know, here on Money Sense we talk about a lot of different topics, and you know, one of the episodes we've done is budgeting and financial planning, and ties right into this, right, with that lifestyle, and you know, hopefully, you know, at this point, our viewers, they already have that budget in place.
Right.
They've hopefully done some of that financial planning. And so they really have a feel for what their lifestyle does look like. And is that matching up with, short-term goals, maybe buying a home, long-term goals, i.e. retirement. So I think that's important.
Absolutely.
So again, I'm ready to buy a house now. I got my pre-approval letter. How much do I need to save? Both maybe from a down payment standpoint, as well as just in general, maybe some best practices for a future home buyer.
Again, there's a number of programs that are out there. If you're a veteran, you can get, in many instances, 100% financing. Rural housing has programs, 100% financing plus. FHA is close to that. There's a down payment requirement there. What the home buyer or prospective home buyer should do would be to go to the lender and say, okay, here's my situation. The lender will ask specific questions about income, because there are programs out there that are available up to certain income levels. Okay. There is, in fact, also one program with Indiana Housing where there's down payment assistance up to 4% of the purchase price, and it's what they call a silent second. It is on the property, but it doesn't need to be paid back if they're in the home for more than 2 years. But years ago, there was a proliferation of down payment assistance programs, created a lot of challenges and problems in the market, and they, for the most part, have disappeared. But I would tell a consumer today, normally, if they don't qualify as a veteran, if they have too much income to qualify for other no down payment programs, or they're not buying in a community that fits certain parameters, at least 5, maybe 10% or a little bit more, save that up. And again, the hope is that after closing, they've got some reserves to put some furniture in the house so that you can't look all the way through it when they close.
All right.
Or you buy that new home and all of a sudden, need a new furnace.
Yeah, all the stuff you don't think about it once you get past the down payment. And
absolutely.
But it all adds up, but you need to budget appropriately, that's for sure.
Yeah. So the next question, I'm excited to hear your answer, because we're in this society now where a lot of people are trying to do things themselves. You see that even in investing, for example, right? So, in today's day and age, today's market, why is it important? Why do you think it's important potentially to work with a realtor, a professional?
Well, as I mentioned before, purchasing a home for most people is probably the biggest investment they're going to make in their entire life. And realtors know the market very well. And that's just not a task that I think most people, even if they're capable of doing it, would want to do, because there are a lot of pitfalls that are involved in that process of buying a home. A realtor can certainly help steer them through that process. There's been some studies done that have been released by our national association that have said, 9 out of 10 home buyers and home sellers said that they would work with their realtor again, or they would recommend the realtor that they use to a family or friend because their experience was a good one. So that's part of it. I know there's also been some studies that have been done that have said that homes that are listed with a realtor, for example, sell for more on average than homes without one. And that doesn't necessarily mean that if I hire a realtor, my home is worth more all of a sudden. What it means is the realtor is pretty adept at analyzing the market and steering, in this case, if we're talking about home sellers, to a price point that's appropriate for them. And a lot of times what happens is somebody tries to sell a home on their own. They may be underpricing their home. They may be overpricing their home. So there's all those things that play into it. Al and I were just having a conversation earlier. He's been in the the mortgage business, the real estate business for well over 20 years now, and he even said in purchasing his home, he used a realtor. And so I think if Al's going to use a realtor, I think that speaks.
We should all use a realtor.
Well, I mean, Al's somebody who's obviously extremely knowledgeable about the business, and if he still feels that he needs a realtor to guide him through the process, I think that speaks volumes. So.
Well, and I would add this. The last time I did buy a house, as Pete said, I had over 20 years experience in the business, and I bought a new house. And the realtor I worked with specifically said, you need to have a couple of home inspections. And I'm kind of scratching my head saying, it's a brand new house, what do I need a home inspection for? To make a long story short, I'm glad that that was in that contract, because there were some issues with the way that in the construction of the house, that having those home inspections, there wasn't anything terrible that the builder didn't do. It's just, it was something that I didn't even think about, that the realtor said, you may not think of this because it's a new home, but you should have these 2 home inspections, and I'm glad we had them done.
It's interesting, and I love that you say that, because one of the things I'm a big proponent of is, we all have our core competencies in life. We hopefully know what we know what we don't know, but it's always important to have that trusted advisor to point out your blind spots and just give you that counsel. And in your case, again, a 20-year veteran in the industry and something that, that they helped you kind of point out, which is, I think, really powerful. So, I mean, at least I'm sold. I mean, I know in the past, I have worked with realtors.
I can get
so
your pre-approval.
I'm a big fan. Thank you. But that being said, I mean, you did say, 9 out of 10 home buyers said they would, or sellers would work with that realtor again. How does one find the right realtor? Is it a word of mouth typically?
Yeah,
resources
that's
available?
a great question. Again, in today's day and age, there are a ton of different ways to go about the process. But I would say the one that I would recommend would be to ask family, ask friends. Those are good places to start. These are people that have had real life experiences dealing with realtors. And but it's also much like choosing a doctor. You have to go through an interview process yourself. You have to make sure the person you're dealing with is of a like mind as you are, that they understand your needs and that they're fully listening. It's no different than, as I said, choosing a doctor. You could, not all doctors are great doctors, and but a lot of it just depends on your personality and how you like to deal with that individual. And I would say that when choosing a realtor, ask for recommendations, but go through the process of interviewing. Ask them how do they communicate? Ask them what their track record is. Ask them what their track record is specifically with, let's say, for example, if you're selling a home in a particular community, how's their track record in that community? So I would treat it just like an interview process. I think that's super important, and I think that's worth the effort of going through.
Well, and I would add, too, that if you go first to the lender, a lot of the lenders in town have great relationships that they've built up with realtors over time.
Great point.
And they may be a good source as well, but to Pete's point, it's a very important relationship that you want to build, so talk to people.
Yeah, no. Yeah, one thing that's coming across in this conversation is that it may be for our viewers, there's been this big swing from maybe subprime lending, you guys call it in the industry, to now maybe needing to have that perfect credit score. Can you speak to that a little bit? Maybe Al?
Yeah, to your point a minute ago, we saw the market do a radical shift between the time I got in the business in the mid-'80s to 2006, where, quite frankly, if you had a pulse, I think there was a loan out there for you. We have now paid the price for that. And so lenders have pulled back not only on their own, but through government oversight, regulation, and some might say over-regulation, to where those loans are not available. You can't say, here's how much I make, and the lender's going to take your word for it anymore. You have to show it. You can't say, this is how much I got in the bank, and they're going to take your word for it. You have to show it.
They want the proof now.
They want the proof. Having said that, there's plenty of money that's available. And lending guidelines, if anything, are just, for the most part, back to when I first got in the business. You're not going to find loans that are out there that are going to allow you 80% of your income to go to a mortgage debt. But from that standpoint, the restrictions in the market are tighter than they were 5-6 years ago. But right now, you're finding that a lot of people are able to buy a house with little nicked up credit that they've got. They can work on it as well by having that credit report. If they see there's something on there, they can work to resolve those issues. You don't need to have a perfect credit report to buy a home, but it helps.
It helps. We have a couple minutes left, so if we have a minute with each of you. Al, quick question I think is important. Now we have that viewer in their home having trouble making payments. Within 60 seconds, what advice do you have for them? What options do they have available? I know it's probably a deep question, but.
Yeah, and it's a great one because we have suffered through a great recession with people and their housing challenges that are there. The industry has reacted to a great extent over that time frame, and now more than ever are wanting to outreach to consumers to make sure that they help them in that situation. The first thing I recommend is contact the lender, servicer, tell them the absolute truth right away. In fact, I was on the phone 2 nights ago with a friend of my sister-in-law's who is dying of cancer. And I said, in her case, reach out to your lender servicer. Also, in the state of Indiana, there's Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority. They have the Indiana Foreclosure Prevention Network, which is part of Indiana Housing, and contact them. They're on the web. They have a website, and they got an 877 number, I believe. And they've got agencies that are all around the state of Indiana to help consumers in their situation.
Wonderful. Great counsel. And I'll kind of finish it with you, if that's okay, Peter. Any last-minute advice for our viewers today?
Just to take advantage of the resources that are available to them, whether that means, some of the online information that's available to them. Don't be afraid to engage a realtor in conversation, whether you're a home seller. Ask that realtor why it's a benefit to them to use a realtor, what advantages will they gain. If you're a home buyer, don't be afraid to engage that that realtor to ask them, hey, what does it take for me to go and see a home? What's all involved in that? Do I have to pay you any money? Some of those things. Nowadays, just one last note, 20 years ago, the conversation when somebody was buying a home shifted from, it used to be they would go to the realtor and they would say, can you show me this home? But nowadays, consumers are so information savvy that it's the opposite. They go online, they search for homes, then they call the realtor and say, Anthony, hey, I've found these 4 homes I'd like to look at.
Right.
Can you
Show
take me to them?
homes.
Right. So by all means, take advantage of those things that are available to them, and don't be shy in the process. It's only going to benefit you to engage people in the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, gentlemen, very much. That was a great conversation. I learned a lot, and I hope our viewers did as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
And thank you for joining us today. I hope you've learned as much as I have. We look forward to seeing you next time for a new episode of Money Sense. I'm your host, Anthony Contrucci, and remember, I always try to make finance fun.
This program is made possible by PSCA, the Plan Sponsor Council of America. For over 60 years, PSCA has served retirement plan sponsors through education, advocacy, and research. Information at psca.org or at 312-419-1863. This program was produced by Lakeshore Public Media and Centier Bank.